Here we are, class, in the final week, week 7. Great job. So let's embark upon chapter 12, the capital budgeting decision. While early comments on administrative procedures and accounting considerations are helpful, the major thrust of this chapter is on the various methods for ranking investment proposals. The basic selection methods are established, mutually exclusive versus non-mutually exclusive events are compared, and the reinvestment assumption, capital rationing, and the net present value profile are presented. This chapter continues with a comprehensive discussion of procedures for depreciation write-off and integrates the resultant cash flow determination with the capital budgeting decision. So let's take a look at what we're going to cover. The chapter concepts center on a capital budgeting decision represents a long-term investment decision, that cash flow rather than earnings is used in the capital budgeting decision. The payback method considers the importance of liquidity but fails to consider the time value of money. The net present value and the internal rate of return are generally the preferred methods of capital budgeting analysis, and the discount or cutoff rate is normally the cost of capital. So, the administrative considerations in the capital budgeting decision center on capital expenditures as outlays for projects with lives extending beyond 1 year and even as long as 25 years for utilities and oil and gas companies. That intensive planning is required, that capital expenditures usually require initial cash flows, often large, with the expectation of future cash inflows. The differing time periods of inflows and outflows require present value analysis. And the longer the time horizon associated with the capital expenditure, the greater the uncertainty. And some areas of uncertainty are product life, interest rates, economic conditions, technological change, and annual costs and inflows. The administrative considerations are search and discovery of investment opportunities, collection of data, evaluation and decision making, and reevaluation and adjustment. Let's take a look at a capital budgeting flowchart. The capital budgeting process focuses on cash flows rather than income. Income figures do not reflect the cash available to a firm to the deduction of non-cash expenditures such as depreciation. Accounting flows are not totally disregarded in the capital budgeting process. Investors' emphasis on earnings per share may, under certain conditions, require use of income rather than cash as the decision criterion. Top management may elect to glean the short-term personal benefits of an income effect rather than the long-term cash flow effects, which are more beneficial from the owner's viewpoint. So in slide 7, let's look at cash flow and the revised cash flow for Alston Corporation that we will use as an example throughout this chapter. Here are the 3 methods for ranking investment proposals. They are the payback method, the internal rate of return, and net present value. So the payback method. The payback period is the length of time necessary for the sum of the expected annual cash inflows to equal the cash investment. A cutoff period is established for comparison. Capital proposals with a payback in excess of the cutoff are rejected. Deficiencies of the method are inflows after the payback period are ignored, The pattern of cash flows is ignored, therefore time value of money is not considered. And though not conceptually sound, the payback method is frequently used because it's easy to use, it emphasizes liquidity, and quick return is important to firms and industries characterized by rapid technological development. Let's move into net present value. In this method, the cash inflows are discounted at the firm's cost of capital or some variation of that measure. If the present value of the cash inflows equals or exceeds the present value of the cash investment, the capital proposal is acceptable. We use the NPV function of the Excel to demonstrate the difference in net present value between investments A and B. The use of Excel provides the opportunity to use sensitivity testing with various discount rates to demonstrate change in NPV. And slide 12 gives you an example of that. With the internal rate of return, the IRR method requires calculation of the rate that equates the cash investment with cash inflows. The calculation procedure is the same as the yield to maturity computation presented in Chapter 9. In investment options, where the IRR exceeds the minimum return on investment, usually the firm's cost of capital or some variation of that measure, is a candidate for approval. To fully comprehend the meaning of the internal rate of return, the student needs to understand how IRR relates to NPV, and so it's important to show that the IRR is the discount rate, interest rate, that makes NPV equal 0. We use the IRR function of Excel to demonstrate the difference between the rates of return for investments A and B. You can show that the goal-seek function in Excel that was used in Chapter 10 to calculate the yield to maturity can also be used to calculate an IRR, since the yield to maturity on a bond is nothing more than the bond's internal rate of return. A financial calculator can also be used to determine the IRR for both annuities and uneven cash flows. We demonstrate the keystrokes needed to solve for IRR with uneven cash flows. Let's stop here and see you again in Week 7, Chapter 12, Part 2.